for today, we have the article Playing at the Speed of Magic by Brian DeMars. And as I was explaining previously, this article focuses on, first, the speed at which you play Magic and what are its benefits and also pros and cons. And it also delves a bit deeper into a discussion on how to learn and how to maximize your learning opportunities, okay? So a bit of definitions. The speed you play is a contributing factor for performance in a competitive event. I don't think this is too far-fetched, right? Essentially, you can think of this. If you don't play fast enough, you might be drawing a lot of games if you're playing on paper. Even on your LGS, that's actually pretty typical with new players, right? Because the game can be overwhelming. But of course, playing fast, it also it can also hinder your decision-making process. So you should find your sweet spot somehow, and we will explore how we can find that. So of course, as we were discussing, faster players will clock out less frequently, and this is very important in online play, both in Magic Arena as well as in Magic Online. That's why sometimes you can't even, some combo decks are not playable at all in Magic Online, for example, because you need to press too many things and it's impossible to automate enough for you to not clock out, which is, it is what it is, I guess. But simply playing faster isn't particularly useful if you're not also playing competently. I think that's how you pronounce it. So I guess this definitely makes sense, right? I might be playing much faster, but I will make many more mistakes. At least I will. Other people won't, maybe. But on top of that, I won't also have enough chances to identify those mistakes that I'm committing, right? So that's why it's also important to slow down a bit sometimes, even if your opponent is spamming your go and spamming the Hedron with the sleepy Hedron or something like that. You just mute your opponent and do your thing. If you clock out, that's fine. Now you know that you should play just a tiny bit faster, but that should be enough, okay? So, of course, the goal is to find the sweet spot. You can't take too long you won't, if you need to think like about what's the optimal play in every single scenario, it would take too much of I think this is pretty obvious, but it will take too much time to actually finish a game, right? I remember, for example, if you don't know about them, it's pretty cool, the Possibility Storm. They have a Patreon page where they share some challenges. So it's like those chess problems of checkmate in one turn, you know, but it's on Magic, so it's great. But those higher rarity or higher difficulty problems, I can spend hours trying to figure that out, and it's like, imagine that you face a similar situation in a match. You don't have that time, so it's obvious that you won't be able to play as optimally as it would be possible given infinite amount of time. But there's a sweet spot there. Imagine it like an elbow curve. There's a point where the return you get for spending more time is actually very marginal. That's why people say, and it's a common heuristic, whether you're playing a match and you're undecided between two cards of the same mana cost and that kind of stuff, probably if you're so uncertain about what's the correct play, probably the margin between the best play and the second best play is way too thin for it to matter. And that's the same that happens also when you're drafting. If you are undecided between two picks, and if you're well informed, all that stuff, assuming you did your homework, it probably doesn't matter, okay? So that's why at some point the sweet spot is found when the return on time investment that you make starts getting very, very low and very, very marginal, okay? Playing at this pace where the speed and competence are both relatively high on a spectrum that reflects their natural and learned abilities is playing in this sweet spot, right? So you maximize your competence and you maximize your speed. It's a problem of two variables. You cannot maximize both at the same time maximally, or at least to their maximum level, but you can establish a trade-off, right? And of course, this is always based on what are your natural abilities and learned abilities. What have you learned in Magic, right? So all those things actually count a lot. We already discussed, so it's you cannot overthink sometimes because of the MTGO clock or in a timer. Actually, I don't. The only time I recall timing out was on stream because I was explaining maybe too much a match on Rogues, and I actually timed out. Hello, GeForce, welcome in. We started reviewing this article just a few minutes ago, and I think it's a pretty sweet one. It's by Brian DeMars, and it's named Playing at the Speed of Magic. So this is actually the article I published on Discord earlier today, I believe, earlier this morning. So yeah, we already understand we should strive for a balance between the playing competence and playing fast. We already understand that it's also crucial for us to learn or to increase our abilities through time, because that will also enable you to both play faster and play more optimally, right? So let's move on. Given that, play at the fastest speed possible, but where competency is not compromised. Exactly what we were saying, and this is pretty interesting because even on computers, there's algorithms that need to take this into consideration. But I don't want to delve that much into there. But we're human beings, and we operate and play games in a reality that is not the ideal or the hypothetical scenario, the optimal scenario, right? We might be getting tilted sometimes. We might not have like I'm drafting and I don't know exactly that a given card is a trap because I don't have the expertise needed to identify that card as a trap, right? So there's a lot of things that take you out of this hypothetical scenario. And for example, in computers, one of the earliest algorithms to solve chess, it's called Minimax. It's called Minimax, and this looks like the name of an ice cream, I know, but the general idea behind this algorithm is chess is a game that in which you have perfect information, right? The whole state, yes, minimize, maximize, exactly, or called Minimax. So essentially you have perfect information, and if you have so what you need to understand is, okay, what paths lead me or my opponent to victory? And then what you do is, okay, given this board state and given that it's your time to play, let's go down, let's create a tree with all the decisions that you could make and the decisions that your opponent could make, and so on and so forth. And you will essentially, at each board state, evaluate the probability of winning the game from that board state, right? Because you can trickle down this tree and understand, okay, we win the game in X percentage of the scenarios here out of Y. Then you trickle that up and you try to see, okay, I would play like this. Then what would your opponent do if they were playing optimally? Okay, they would do Y. And then what can you do in response of that? I would do Z. And you get like this meta tree that you can traverse, and assuming that your opponent plays optimally, you will also make the optimal play. Of course, that's also why, and you see many players mentioning this, like LSV won't play the same way against Paulo, Vitor Damo da Rosa, as he would play against me, for example, because I'm a much worse player, for sure, and essentially he might bluff more against Paulo, because he would know that Paulo has a much better understanding of the meta game. It would be much easier for Paulo to notice Luis that he was bluffing like a stomp on turn 2 or whatever. So he might play around that, but he might also be able to point the bluff and actually play around the bluff, right? Where if I'm not aware of the metagame and all that stuff, I might not even notice the bluff. So I might just do my thing and he wouldn't care. Like attacking, he attacks with a 2/2 into my 5/5 and I would block, just because I'm not even realizing that he might be bluffing a +4/+4 combat trick that is commonly played somewhere. Okay, so the situations are not optimal. Okay, moving on. And this is an interesting part. So the knowledge that allows us to recognize play patterns we've seen before, as well as interpret situations that we've seen before and choose the line of play, are learned over time. Okay? So in order to play fast, you need to trust more your intuition. But before you can trust your intuition, you need to actually develop that intuition, right? It's like a fighter in a boxing match. They have so many hours, and sometimes you see them deflecting a punch or something like that blazingly fast. It's just because they had so much time that a slight movement on the shoulders of their opponent would make them know that the punch was coming, right? So you need time to develop this intuition, and only by playing Magic and watching others play Magic and try to employ that yourself, you will be able to establish this foundational intuition that will enable you to play faster. And essentially, why committing stuff to intuition? Because essentially we have two brains in a way. If you're familiar with the Thinking Fast and Slow book, you will know this notion. But you have a brain that it thinks fast. It's much more efficient in energy usage, all that stuff that you use, that is like your intuition, that provides you that intuition that makes those automatic decisions, you know. But you also have the other brain, the more rational one, that takes a lot of energy, that is single threaded. That's why it is said that you can only pay attention to one thing. But I could be cooking and listening to a podcast just fine, because actually the listening to the podcast is the task that I have committed to this single threaded brain. But then I have the cooking part of it allocated to my automatic side, automatic brain, you know? So that's a bit the idea. You still need to do that deliberate decision making sometimes, but you want to minimize that as much as possible, because it also alleviates your cognitive load, and you're able to employ that when it actually matters. Okay, moving on. And what the author is mentioning here, it's like a state of fluidity. If you're aware of that concept of flow, you will recognize this. You enter a state where you're just at the edge of your skill level, and you feel like fully focused, and you feel like the actions flow through you in some way, right? Yeah, and of course the speed is also improved over time. Identify what they determine to be the best play or plays. Assess. Yeah, of course. So there's many tasks that come into actually. So you watch pros playing Magic, and of course it's like there's no actual physical barrier to do what they're doing, right? You like, it's dragging the mouse essentially. So there's no superhuman skill in Magic, physical skill, that you cannot replicate, right? But there are many things behind that decision, behind that drag of the mouse button, right? So all of these things take time. Identifying the best plays or play to the best of one's ability, given again the experience and the natural skills. Assess and formulate a response, and quickly perform, execute, and implement that response. This is like there's the input, process, and output cycle, right? And all those steps can be fastened, right? You can notice your inputs much faster, like understanding if your opponent is passing priority too fast on Arena. Those are things that you start developing, or your opponent is not playing, is not committing creatures in their tempo deck that plays a Wrath or something like that, right? So you start noticing those stuffs, that stuff. The ideal setting. Now this is, I believe, the more interesting part of this discussion, because it discusses how to maximize the learning opportunities, right? And according to the author, and I think that it definitely makes a lot of sense, I don't think it can be the sole method for improving if you want to be competitive and participate in tournaments and all of that. But the author says that a relaxed, casual setting is often ideal for practicing new Magic skills, such as speed of play. And that's definitely true for practicing new skills. It's much better. Essentially, what you're doing here, and we will discuss further, is you're alleviating your cognitive load from other inputs, essentially. So you're not worried about the clock, you're not worried about the results. You might actually even discuss things with your opponent more freely, without worrying to pass on too much information about your game or something like that. So it's much more relaxed. You have less input, that overwhelms you, which enables you to focus more deeply in what you're trying to improve. That's the mindset behind that. So yeah, alleviate the pressure so that you can focus on other things without judgment. And this is also very important. So it's not only about pressure on inputs, it's also about pressure on processing, because sometimes if you do a misplay and you're playing casually, you might not care that much. Or if you draft a bad deck casually, okay, so if I pick this card or that card, I might have gone to have a better outcome, but you don't care that much, right? If you're playing for high stakes and trying to develop these new skills and all of that, it's much harder. That's why I actually advise new drafters or people trying to get into drafts to draft against bots. That's much better. You don't have that clock pressure, which can be overwhelming. I sure remember it was to me, and that's how I started. I started with the bots against bots in late Ikoria, and you just develop that skill over time, and it becomes much faster. By the way, regarding this, I'm planning to push some YouTube videos on like an exhaustive overview or exhaustive walkthrough of drafts, essentially, to try to convey this notion of, okay, let's slow things down as much as possible without getting like a 5 hours draft video, and discuss every decision and try to understand what I'm considering and all that stuff, because I don't really have that time when I'm drafting against humans because of the clock. So in casual settings, of course, clock and results don't really matter. So it's also very useful to discuss the situation with an opponent and explore possible lines of play, even getting back or putting that card on your end and replacing one that you had if you want to test that card in that matchup. Those are very typical things to do in test groups, at least according to what I read about. So that's something very interesting to consider. So the author also says my competency and knowledge of Magic increased and often peaked, likely resulted from playing and practicing in a casual context. And this is very interesting because this is a very good Magic player with a lot of results under his belt, saying that, well, this is a statement that I cannot make this statement because I never have that much success yet. Growth mindset, don't forget about that. So it's very interesting to understand, okay, so this actually seems to work, at least for him. It might not work for everyone, but it's still helpful to give yourself the permission to play more casually, even if you want to improve and participate in more tournaments and do all that stuff. Just play more casually sometimes. It's establish a balance. Again, as I was discussing previously, you should also be exposed to those high intensity situations where you're like a bit stressed and a bit anxious, and sometimes you might actually face tilt. We actually already reviewed an article in the past regarding that. So it's still important to train against those adversities, but not while you're also developing your skills to play faster in a given matchup, or you're trying to understand a bit better when to time your removal spells or wraths or something like that. So don't try to do it all at once. Playing on a casual context can help. For example, on my end, after I read this article, I was actually thinking, okay, how can I expose myself to these casual contexts more often? And that's where my wish to collect all the dual decks came from. I have the Mind versus Might one, which I find very, very interesting, and there's a bunch of them already, and I've ordered like more than half of them. So that's something. That's one way. There's also Commander, of course. Commander is also very interesting because you have those political dynamics, I guess. I never played a match of Commander, but I'm familiar with the format. So find your way to be able to play casually, and for example, when you're grinding the Magic Arena's ladder, you might definitely need some moments like this in which you're just playing, get the stakes down and just try to enjoy the game, because it's a game and it's meant to be enjoyed. And he actually says also that when he feels a lot of pressure to perform well, and this pressure is, of course, more often than not, this pressure is derived from yourself to yourself, right? So do that self-assessment, do that introspection. Might play either plateaued and often regressed. So this is pretty interesting. And again, I mentioned this in the past, and I mentioned it again. for example, when the Arena Open was unsealed recently, I felt pressure to at least get into day 2. Like, I'm streaming limited. I'm trying to establish myself as someone who understands limited very well and who understands strategy, and I'm trying to grow in that front. So I felt the pressure to like play as many times as possible to get into day 2, and I played 7 times and I didn't get to day 2. Like, at least half of those pools I played a lot suboptimally, but a lot. Like, there were 2 subsequent pools that I went 0-3, 0-3, just because I was like, I felt I was pressuring myself to achieve that, and it got my win rate to flat. It definitely didn't work, and I realized that the morning after, but it took some time, right? I didn't realize it during that period, and I guess this might happen a lot, but it's very important for you to identify that as soon as possible so that you can overcome that and try to work on the next thing. So how can I keep on improving, right? And that's definitely a point of improvement. I might be I might be building my decks very well. I might be playing reasonably well, but if my mindset is not there, I'm throwing all of my win rate percentage points away, which is not where you want to be. So moving on, the harder I try, the more consistently my results and finishes plateau, then more stress and anxiety I felt about Magic. I wanted to highlight this one because if you want to perform well in a game such as Magic, which is high variance, so you're exposed to fluctuations with high win rates, low win rates, and all of that. So in these high variance games or scenarios, what you're relying on is consistency. But being consistent, and what I mean by this is like you average your results out. So if you play consistently good, given the chances that are presented to you, you will maximize your win rate in the long run. Okay, so you will be, the more consistently you play, the more you play consistently well, the better you are off, and that's definitely essential for Magic. But if you put a lot of pressure, and if you do, you will get stressed out, and you might actually distance yourself from the game from time to time. So it's still helpful to take some breaks here and there, but if you want to get good results, you need to have a strategy that is sustainable in the long run. If it's not sustainable, you will plateau. That's essentially it, or regress, as the author was saying. And there's a concept, a teaching strategy called effective filter that the author mentions, which is like, it's a filter that you put on your learning process that is derived from your emotions, essentially, your mind state, right? So stress, anxiety, comfort level, and anything else that contribute to how receptive a student is to receiving, processing, and internalizing information when learning a skill is what's built into this effective filter. Okay, so it's a nice small mental model to consider. You might remember or recall at some point, okay, what's my effective filter, what's the degree that my effective filter is on. Okay, I might need to relax, take a break, drink some water, relax for a bit, get back at it tomorrow, whatever it needs. So more specifically, a low effective filter is when you feel comfortable, confident, and relaxed, tend to be more receptive to taking, processing, and retaining information, as well as being able to recall and perform what they learn later in a real life situation. So this is also very important, and I would add here, like, sleeping habits are key to learn. Exposing yourself to the task in small digestible chunks, but often, right? Like on a given day, I'm watching a bit of Magic content in the early morning, during breakfast, a bit during lunch. Then I might play actually some Magic in the morning, just one game or two, something like that. Or in the days that I'm streaming, well, it's more exposure to Magic and more discussion on Magic. So in small digestible chunks, expose yourself to what you're trying to learn in a way that you don't feel stressed out, and sleep on it, and sleep well on it. That's how you actually keep on improving. So just watching, like subscribing or buying all the courses on Spike's Academy and just watching them in a single day, well, that might not be the best approach for learning. You might want to watch a section, then okay, this section was on control decks. Okay, let's try out some control decks and see if I'm exposed to situations where I can recall this information. Okay, because each time you recall it, you get better at recalling it in the future, at strengthening the connections and making it much more likely that you will use that this information, what you learn will be helpful in the future. And there's also, well, you might also be having a high effective filter, which means that you're stressed, anxious, uncomfortable. You tend to learn, retain, recall less information when asked to do so later on a real life situation. By the way, if you're learning something, it might even be Magic related, but it's not as likely, I would say. But if you're learning something for school or a language or something like that, there's a method of using flashcards. So flashcards are great for that. Once you're trying just to memorize and to internalize some pieces of information, flashcards are great. And there's a method, Anki, ANKI, exactly, which you have apps for desktop, for mobile, all that stuff. You can code your input your flashcards, and essentially you repeat flashcards until successfully go over them, like 20 per day or 10 per day or something like that. And you repeat them first within 10 minutes, then within 1 day, then within 5 days, something like that, So each time you recall this information, you're able to retain it for longer, And the goal is, at some point, you're recalling this from 1 month to the next, 1 month to 3 months afterwards, something like that. And at that point, you have that information internalized, okay? So that it's a great method. I used it for example, for learning out the theory for my latest Wing Chun exam. So, and it worked beautifully. How a person feels actually plays a role in how receptive they are to the processes associated with learning a skill. So again, introspection is really key. Having like a clock like this one that's with a random alarm that notifies you about something that essentially sets you a break point in your day, that reminds you to self-assess, to breathe in, breathe out, recenter yourself. Okay, why am I feeling like this? So those things are very, very interesting. So getting those small notifications might be really interesting. Yeah. So moving on. Yes. So there's also this situation about, or this concept of broad knowledge, spaced repetition. I think so. It's based on the same notion, yes. So there are two types of knowledge. The one that is broad, that is generalizable to new situations, like bolt the bird or try to maximize the amount of mana that you spend in a turn, and the specific knowledge, like in a given matchup, as I was discussing previously, I might not want to play my Thieves Guild Enforcer at the end of my opponent's turn because I would be exposing it to a stump without actually taking that much value from it. So that's something to consider, right? There's broad concepts and specific concepts. And essentially what you are trying to maximize, generally speaking, or more often, is this broad knowledge. So we can draw upon fundamentals and generalizations, which is this kind of broad knowledge that we've learned in the past, and apply them to similar situations. But the situations are always unique, and that's why it's very important to develop, first and foremost, to develop these skills and to be able to translate them into specific situations. Because if you're always depending on, or 100% dependent on like sideboard guides, if you're always hoping that someone that is coaching you tells you the exact play to take or something like that, if you get used to this always getting coached situation, you won't be able to generalize out of this broad knowledge and actually apply them to different situations. Yeah, part of the knowledge is generalized, part is specialized. But it's still important to know about the specialized knowledge, okay? That's still very important. And by the way, I'm skipping over parts. You still have the link available either in the description down below if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're watching this live on the chat in bit.ly/magic articles Diogo Já Pinto. Yeah, so if you play in a state of anxiety and all of that, it essentially lowers the competency in your plays, and more important than that, it makes you less receptive towards recognizing and learning from mistakes, right? Because you're completely out of sync of what's happening in the present, right? Anxiety, stress, all that gets you out of sync of present, right? And what that implies is you won't be paying attention to what you could have done differently. You're already thinking, oh, but I need to win this match. This is the final match, or whatever it is. Don't put yourself in those situations, because other than lowering your ultimate outcome at that moment in time, it also lowers your opportunities for learning to actually grow and be better in the future. And so something interesting here is the author is also very, very real and very logical about his goals in Magic. So he thinks he doesn't want to further explore his professional career in Magic. He had some pretty good results in the past already, and that's fine. So defining your expectations, your goals, is really key, because if I'm expecting to be playing in the Pro Tour like next year or something, is that realistic? Well, it might be in a way, but that's way too distant, I would say. There should be some intermediate steps to actually reach that goal, right? So that's why I'm mentioning here, defining, there's this acronym SMART goals, or SMART expectations, which means that your goals should be specific, so something targeted. It's not, I want to be good at Magic, I want to be a good Magic player, okay? that's fine and good, but how is that specific enough? Okay, it's specific in the sense that it's in Magic, but it also goes into the next stage, which is it measurable? So what do you actually want to achieve? And being specific might be, I want to be better at in constructed. In standard. Let's be as specific as possible. Okay, that's specific. I want to be better in standard. But is that measurable? Not exactly. So what do I want to do here? I want to, I don't know. I want to pass or to win or something like that. Win 3 games or 5 games in Star City Games qualifier, something like that, right? Okay, so that's measurable. Standard qualifiers. That is. Okay, that's specific and measurable. But is that achievable? So it all depends on your skill level. Maybe you would need some intermediate goals before reaching that stage. So that you actually gain the understanding. Okay, I haven't done it yet, but I would like to know if it's achievable or not. So let's take a different goal as a proxy to get to this bigger goal. And is it realistic? Actually, so achievable and realistic. In terms of achievable, so is it possible? It is possible. It is realistic given my skills? Well, it depends, right? As we were discussing. Is it timely? So am I establishing a time bound to it, like 6 months? I want to do this within 6 months. That might be good. And this goal would actually, you would derive from this goal a series of actual steps. So I might want to play at least 2 Star City qualifiers per week until then, or standard ones at least. If I'm not doing that, I might seek out coaching from Party Zeke or something like that. So those are things that you can be considering. And those are definitely things that I'm trying to employ. Like I'm trying to either participate in a tournament or get coaching from Party Zeke on a given week. But a more specific goal that I had set for myself when I started playing Magic last year, or replaying Magic, but again, I always discount the past because I basically only knew the rules of the game. I wanted to win a local tournament at the game store within 1 year, and I actually did it in 3 months, which was great. But it is what it is. It's a stepping stone. So okay, what's the next goal that I want to have in here? So that's something interesting, right? And you also should set up goals so that you have opportunities to celebrate, right? If you're always focused on the next thing, and you never stop to celebrate, you will value less achieving your goals, I feel like. So this is something very interesting that we can discuss afterwards, but it's something to consider. So the key is that by taking time, I actually learn the information. I'm better able to recall what I learn and I'm better able to recall what I learn in new situations. Of course, again, you will gain speed, and this is something that I say a lot, like in new hires at work or something like that. It's trust in the process. In the beginning, it might be overwhelming. It might be too much. And Magic also feels a bit like that. Like, oh Jesus, 300 cards out of nowhere into the format. How can I cope with this? But you start identifying some patterns. I'm still in this process of identifying these patterns and learning more about that. But trust in the process. It will get better. Okay, that's what I can say. And if it's not getting better, maybe you need to be shaken off your local minimum, as we were discussing previously. yeah, and it's okay to take a break. You're always allowed to take a break. Don't feel pressure to, like, even if set up some goals, but you're not feeling progress towards them. First, try to evaluate if you're just giving up. But if you set the goals in a timely fashion, like I want to do this in 6 months, okay, let's commit to this goal within the next 6 months, and then I'll have the freedom to reevaluate my relationship against Magic. Maybe I just want to play Commander and play it casually just for fun. I might reach that decision after that. But given this time frame, let's try to commit and be thorough in our approach to the game. And of course, I'm speaking about Magic, but I'm actually speaking about a lot other things, right? This is applicable to all or most situations in life that are complex enough to be worth pursuing, right? So again, we already discussed what specific knowledge and broad knowledge. Specific knowledge encompasses things like a given sideboard plan or a popular deck or a given sequencing of turns, something like that. Broad knowledge are those heuristics, those concepts that are applicable to many different situations and from which actually the specific knowledge is derived. Yeah, and specific knowledge is something that it becomes, and this is very, very interesting. So if you're only focused on studying what's the latest constructed metagame and what's the sideboard guide for decks, for the best deck or something like that, pay attention to the fact that specific knowledge in Magic, it might matter today, but it will become irrelevant in no time, okay? Formats and things are changing so fast, even more right now, because virtually all the tournaments are happening online, so it's much easier and faster to process the data that comes from there and expose that to the world. So metagames are changing by the hour almost. So employing too much effort in specific knowledge, it's not exactly the place you want to be. Now, as I was saying previously, specific knowledge is derived from broad knowledge. So you better work on your broad knowledge, right? Because that will enable you to two things. First, it's much easier for you to digest and even derive for yourself specific knowledge about a format, about something. And it will also be reusable. So it's like a learn once, use many times tool, right? So that's, you should keep on growing in that, because at some point specific knowledge might be encompassed into the scope of your broad knowledge, or it will be trivial for you to derive that specific knowledge out of the broad one. Having played a particular matchup that broad knowledge has been applied to, they develop specific knowledge applicable to a specific matchup. And here we're discussing writers and pros and, well, good players altogether, right? So the author also mentions here a few specific situations, but I think we're touching. Essentially, I try to curate what we are actually touching on during the stream, during the video. Yeah. So the author also says, of course, achieving a greater fluidity of play and having the confidence that comes from being able to apply broad knowledge to a specific situation. This is a recurring topic by now, right? Yeah, and as we discussed previously, those that rely too much on guidance, too much on those sideboard guides and all of that, it's those that are most unsuccessful, because you're always presented with new situations, and if you don't have the skills to generalize your broad knowledge into the specific situations and instantiate that knowledge in specific situations, you won't be able to to play optimally when those are presented to you. And it can be definitely challenging to get out of this. I think the best way to do it is actually just do it, just try it out at least a bit, and don't be afraid and don't try to turn back. Just try to draft. For example, this was something when I started playing rogues and playing a bit more constructed. So I had sideboard guides, I've studied that kind of stuff, but then I would close them, I would try to sideboard myself, I would take notes of what I did, and after the game I would compare against the plan and try to understand, okay, but why? Why did I do this, and why do the author suggest doing that? Why does this make sense? Okay, so trying to understand the why and not always the how only can set you on a path to success, I believe. Yeah, and ultimately you can't replace caps in broad knowledge with specific knowledge, because you will always, specific knowledge by definition will only be relevant in specific situations, right? So stronger players constantly fill in the gaps in specific knowledge by applying their broad knowledge to new game situations. So I might know about a given opening given my end with rogues, but then my opponent plays a red mana, so I might need to try to understand, okay, they're playing red, so how can I adapt a bit the plan and deviate from what I'm advised to do typically. And again, this is a bit related to what we discussed above regarding what situations you're exposing yourself to, and the same situation in a casual setting versus in a competitive setting can have completely different interpretations. You might put a lot of pressure on yourself, saying, "I'm bad. I played a bad deck." So you're essentially externalizing the responsibility of that and blaming the world or blaming yourself, and that's not the best way to grow, right? The best way to grow is, okay, what did I do wrong? How can I adjust? But if you're playing from an anxiety stance, anxious stance, you're less likely to identify those situations and to learn from them, right? So yeah, and of course, I guess it's intuitive who learns more. If you're in a casual setting and you think, okay, but I could have done differently, or you discuss that with your opponent, so that's really useful to consider. We judge ourselves a lot. Often we're our own harshest critics, that's for sure. I know I am mine. But being hard on yourself is not conducive to learning, and it actually develops bad habits. If you're always blaming yourself, I'm no good. That's the exact contrary of what I tend to preach on this stream, which is growth mindset, right? So what I'm suggesting is that if you've hit a plateau in your play, jamming 20 matches and likely getting the same result may not be the most productive or effective use of your time. So get out of that, get shaken by getting out of that comfort zone and try to understand what other paths could you be considering. Like I might start keeping more shady ends and try to understand, okay, does this matter in this matchup? I might try different sideboard plans, and I might just main deck some cards just to try to understand if they play well in some matchups, something like that. Try to get out of your comfort zone, watch other pros playing the same deck that you're playing, or whatever else, and try to get some ideas from there. Applying the concepts to speed. And again, we're getting back, closing the article to the discussion of speed. It's being able to understand what the situation is and apply it to what you know to the situation with the high degree of fluidity. Okay, so again, the same thing. Use the knowledge that you gather, that you learn, and apply that. And the more intuition you have on those on that knowledge, built on top of that knowledge, the better you will be able to actually reach the finish line, I guess. Yeah, and again, as discussed previously, mood, your emotions, everything else, it really impacts your performance. So be aware of that and do those sort of self-assessments, right? Try to understand why are you feeling like that? How can you change that? How can develop rituals, whatever it takes to take you back to the center, to the present, right? And ultimately, it's you just, if you feel comfortable playing at a given speed, Magic, that's likely close to your optimal level. When I'm playing off stream, I tend to play much faster and I do more mistakes, so I know that I need to calibrate a bit down the speed at which I play offline Magic, or offline from the stream. So practice at your own pace, soak up everything, and the skills will come and eventually translate to fluidity. Yeah, don't try to rush steps. Just trust the process. Again, that I think that's a good mantra to remember. Yeah, and ultimately, when you reach this stage where you play with a high degree of fluidity, where your decisions and actions flow through you very fast, you are more likely to enjoy the games, to actually take more from Magic, and ultimately, by doing that, you will also be able to play Magic more consistently. So it's like a good snowball effect, right? Hello, Dark. Hello. How are you doing? Welcome to the stream. We're reviewing an article by Brian DeMars, by the way, for anyone that joined in the meantime, called "Playing at the Speed of Magic," which is really interesting. It's definitely really interesting. We're wrapping it up, and we will get into some Kaldheim drafts in no time. And other than that, this will be made available on YouTube offline later. So yeah, it's a good snowball effect, as I was saying. So the more you play in this state of fluidity, of flow, the more you will enjoy the games, which will make you play more Magic, which will make you better at Magic and achieve a higher degree of fluidity in the game. So it's a good snowball effect, right? But you need to establish the process to reach that stage. Hello, you. How are you doing? Welcome. I'm glad you joined us today. We're about to start the draft too, and we're wrapping up this amazing article, which you can access via the articles command, and I actually shared it in the Discord earlier today. And ultimately, Magic is, as the author puts it, it's a game of infinite complexity. It's impossible for you to truly complete the game or get a full grasp of the game. No one does it, even people who play the game for 20 plus years, because it's always changing, right? But that's actually why we like the game, right? If it stalled, if it was like the most common board games, you might not have much. It might not have much to offer after a few playthroughs, right? But that's not Magic. People like the pros have 20,000 plus games played on arena only, and they have many more years before even arena existed of playing a lot of Magic. So again, and this goes back to what we were discussing previously, hard work, focus, and dedication are still assets, and it's still important to focus on them. Without them, you won't be able to reach your highest level of playing Magic or doing whatever doing whatever you're trying to pursue, right? But recognize that it's also important to put enjoyment in your Magic experience, and to put casual play or low stakes opportunities for you to play the game, so that you're allowed to focus more on some skills that you're trying to develop, and not get that confused with the pressure of high stakes play, or the pressure to finish the game because the clock or the timer is running out, all that stuff. Because it's in those situations that you will maximize your learning capacity, right? So, how did you find today's level up? I hope that you learned and liked it at least more than Elsa did. You can find the link for the original in the video description down below. If you like this kind of content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. That also helps spreading out the word and helping as many Magic players as possible. And on top of that, it also means the world to me. Also, let me know in the comment section down below what are you working on, or what do you want to work on to take your game to the next level. We might just gear our future level up reviews towards that. I do also stream on Twitch, so if you want to interact with me live, head over to twitch.tv/DiogoJapinto. We're building an awesome community in there, and we would definitely love to have you around. Thank you for joining, and see you next time. Planeswalking out!